It's the Big E Sports Extravaganza.
It's a tradition.
Your weekly destination for all things going on in the sports universe. We don't just talk X's and O's. We go beyond them. Bringing you some of the most engaging guests from around the nation. Fasten your seatbelts.
It's showtime.
Now, here's your hostess with the mostest, Elissa Walker-Campbell.
Elissa Walker-Campbell, I want to welcome you back to the Big E Sports Show. And the 2025 Major League Baseball season, it is underway. We're going to be covering all the biggest storylines and what we can anticipate here in the month of May. It is an honor to welcome in one of the most respected voices in baseball, a man who has seen it all from the pitcher's mound to the manager's seat. He is a two-time All-Star in 69 and 71, a former NL Manager of the Year, and a beloved figure in the Houston Astros history. He is a true baseball lifer with stories and wisdom that spans generations. We are so delighted to welcome into the program, actually for the very first time, and that is Larry Dierker. Hello, Larry.
Well, how you doing? After that introduction, they put a lot of pressure on me.
Oh, hey, well, you have an incredible legacy, and we are looking forward to being reflective and a little nostalgic and talking about some of your favorite memories. But right now, we are a few months into the Major League Baseball season, and just what are your early impressions of the league this year? What do you think, Larry?
Well, I'm not a fan of a lot of the rules changes that MLB has issued over the last 6 or 7 years, even really all the way back to the DH. I thought it was a pretty good sport to begin with. But I understand that if you own the business, your number one goal is to make money. And I think that they've done a lot of things that have enabled themselves to make more. Gambling is the biggest one.
Well, how do you feel? Let's talk some more about the rule changes, like what the pitch clock and these expanded base paths. I mean, have they improved the game in your view? Are you for it?
Yeah, I think the pitch clock has definitely had a positive impact on the pace of the game. I tend to think that when I was playing the 60s and 70s, and even after that, that the pace was not that different than it is right now, but I guess I'm not sure why the hitters kept stepping out and the pitchers kept stepping off, and the game's dragged into 3 hours plus, even on a low-scoring game. A lot of that may be managing and micromanaging, substitutions and bullpen. But I think the pace is good right now. I wish they had done it a different way. Had it been me, I would have said, let's put a little buzzer in the umpire's back pocket.
Uh-huh.
And when it buzzes, then the pitcher has a ball in the count. So you don't have a clock up there running that everybody can watch, and it's a distraction to me. But I do like the effect it's had on the pace.
You know, talking about distractions, do you think there are too many analytics in today's game? So much data where managers really can't manage their instincts anymore.
So to make it standard way to manage a game with respect to the bullpen, and once you have a designated hitter, then you don't have to pinch hit for the pitcher. You don't have to double switch. And so I think maybe the idea that if you bring in a lefty to face a lefty, you've got to face a couple more hitters too is a good idea. And in general, I think the athletes that we have down there on the field are better than they've ever been. There's more guys that can throw near 100 miles an hour. There's more guys that can hit the ball 450 feet. You've got shortstops and hitting 25 home runs, which, were always a few that could do that. Now it seems like the standard. So I think we really have some athletic players to watch. And, of course, that's the main thing.
Yeah. Hey, we're going to talk about some of those athletic players, but what is your take on the current state of pitching in the league? Are strikeouts too dominant, or are hitters just adjusting?
Well, I don't know if strikeouts are too dominant. That's part of what I think the analytics are telling them. But, it makes you wonder if Greg Maddux would have ever been signed a guy like Kirk Reeder. There were always guys that won a ton of games by pitching down in the zone, down and away mostly, and trying to get ground balls, and who would be just happy to make the best pitch you can make, which is any first pitch you throw to a batter, when he hits it, makes it out. So I think, encouraging contact by throwing good low strikes is still a viable way to pitch. But you don't see too many guys do that anymore.
Hey, the great Larry Dierker is with us on the Big E Sports Show. Many different ways to connect. We always love to hear from you on social media at eRadio Sports. You can email the show info@eradiosports.com. And I'm your host, Elissa Walker Campbell. We're going to talk about your former team, Larry Dierker, and that is the Astros. They currently hold a 16-14 record, placing them second in the AL West. So how does this performance align with, let's say, preseason expectations, especially considering the team had a lot of roster changes in the offseason?
Yes, I think it's going to take longer to evaluate the impact of the roster changes because as with any trade, we traded years ago, we traded Larry Anderson to get Jeff Bagwell. And people were going, Jeff Bagwell, nobody's ever heard of him. He's in Double-A guy. Larry Anderson's one of our best relief pitchers.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't know how good Bagwell was going to become. And we don't know how good or not so good the players we got in the Tucker trade are going to be. And so obviously, if you're going to trade a player of that caliber, you're expecting a lot in return. And maybe they'll get it. But, going 30 days into the first season, it's pretty hard to judge it at that point. It's a lot of pressure for these guys, too. They come to a new team, and they're expected to hold their own in the major leagues for a team that's traditionally been a winning team and been to the playoffs almost every year. So I think once you get into the middle of the season where you're not worried too much about how you look or what you're doing, that you're just going out there every day and playing, and we see what these guys really look like. So far, they look okay. But to lose Tucker and lose Bregman and hope to get back into the playoffs might be a stretch. But I think it was a wise decision on the part of the team to try to get some control over the payroll, because with the crazy stuff that was going on this winter and a guy signing for, lifetime wealth, it's how can you make enough money to pay these guys? Well, maybe the owners have a way to make that much money, but I think that a wise thing to do, if you get to the position the Astros have been in a couple of times now, really, starting back when Springer went to Toronto, is you've got to let some good players go. And when you do, you have to see how you can do with a different team. And if you get into July with the trade deadline at the end of July, if you're in the race, then maybe you open up the checkbook and you say, we're going to get this guy that's great and he can get us into the playoffs. And we hope to sign him in the next offseason. But if we don't, at least, we only have to pay half the salary this year. The same thing we did when I was managing and we got Randy Johnson. We knew that it was unlikely. I shouldn't say unlikely, but we understood that he was going to become a free agent. He was building a home in Phoenix. If he signed with a team that had spring training in Phoenix, he could live at home. So there were some things that led you to believe it might be hard to sign him. It was hard, and the Diamondbacks got him, and he did a great job for him. I think a lot of what I believe, or I believed as a manager as well, and even pitching, is that sometimes just being patient and let things develop and play out is a good strategy. But, it's hard to be patient with so much pressure on winning and on it's just, you get on your phone to look at a few things, and the next, you're locked into watching videos of sporting events. At this point, NBA playoffs is probably a bigger deal than the beginning of the Major League Baseball season, but some people are just baseball fans, and they don't care about basketball. I don't know. I feel like letting things play out is oftentimes the best strategy when, and even in an individual game, sometimes you get behind 5 or 6 runs and you win the game. And sometimes if you expend all your bench players and pitchers trying to win that game and you're all out of pitchers and nobody left on the bench in the 7th inning, it makes it hard to to finish that comeback. So resisting the temptation of doing something rather than nothing is hard, but sometimes I think it's a good idea.
Well, the Houston Astros, as we were talking about, they saw significant changes in the offseason. As you had mentioned, the departure of Kyle Tucker, Alex Bregman, and just noted how, these changes certainly have affected the team dynamics and on-field performance. But what about the addition of Christian Walker and joining the lineup, and just how, as a player, how he has adapted and the impact that he's having with the team?
Well, we've seen the evidence of a guy who's under pressure, so living up to advanced billing, and being over 30 years old already himself. I'm sure he wanted to do better coming out of the gate, but he's hit a couple home runs recently that show the raw power that he's got. I'm feeling pretty good about him right now, and also a pretty good fielder. He's made a couple plays that probably wouldn't have been made by whoever was playing first base.
Well, let's talk about Lance McCullers Jr. because he is set to make his first appearance since Game 3 of the 2022 World Series this Sunday against the White Sox. So what are realistic expectations for him after having such a long layoff? How do you think he's going to do on Sunday?
Well, I don't know how he's going to do on Sunday. I just hope that he's healthy enough to take a place in the rotation and keep making starts. He hasn't been able to do that really since 2017, I don't think. I haven't looked at his statistics over the years, but most of it would be that he's been injured and not pitching. So I have for years let myself count on him getting back in the rotation and being a productive pitcher. But, he's such a good pitcher. I mean, he's an extraordinary pitcher. But there are some guys that just have whatever the biomechanics they have in their body, it won't stand up to going out there and throwing a lot of pitches at full speed in a competitive major league game. Your adrenaline gets up a little bit. I just hope his arm holds up. If his arm holds up, I think he'll win. I don't know what he'll do Sunday, but over time, if his arm is healthy, he's going to win.
Well, you're a former NL Manager of the Year. Let's talk about just inside the clubhouse. What can the Astros pitching staff do to support McCullers and avoid overworking him as he ramps up for his return?
Well, same thing they do with everybody. They count pitches. If you can't throw more than 100 pitches, for me, you're not working hard enough as a starting pitcher, but you can if they won't let you. So, I remember, I think it was 85, 86, somewhere in there. Nolan Ryan had some arm issues, and he was with the Astros at that time, and they put him on a 100-pitch limit, and he was livid. He just couldn't stand the idea that he had to quit pitching at 100 pitches, and I would be too, because it depends on obviously who's down there in the bullpen. But for me, a lot of times when I look at who was warming up, that was an extra incentive to get the next guy out and get back in the dugout, because I didn't trust the other guy to have a better chance than I did. And so if I'd had Billy Wagner on teams I played for, I would have been very willing to let him pitch the ninth inning just about any time I had a lead. But when you look down there and see guys that aren't quite that good, it's a different story.
Well, speaking of good, how good, when we talk about the Astros, is Framber stuff in your estimation, and what's going on with his game? Just talk about his mechanics, and he just seems like he is flawless, and as demonstrated as he's one of the most dominant pitchers for the Astros.
Are you talking about Valdez?
Framber, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, he's one of those guys. I don't think the Astros would agree with me, but he's one of those guys. If I had him, I would say, look, you've got to learn to pound the outside corner at the knees against right-handed hitters, because they cannot get the ball off the ground. And there aren't any home runs that start off as ground balls. There are a lot of singles and a few doubles, but mostly if you pitch for contact and you throw low and away with his sinker, the guys are going to chop the ball on the ground. And he wouldn't have to throw all those other pitches and try to strike guys out. he's got a wicked curveball, and he gets a lot of strikeouts with it. But you know who had a wicked curveball in the beginning of his career and got to the point near the end where he hardly ever threw it? Greg Maddux. And the reason was that he had more command of his other pitches and he didn't need it. And so what I would say with Framber is I'm not sure he needs it as much as he thinks he does, or whether they just want him to strike everybody out. I think he would throw a lot less pitches and have just as many wins if he would pitch to contact with his sinker. But that's not what he usually does.
Well, Larry, you began your professional baseball journey at the ripe young age of 17 when you signed with the Houston Colt 45s. And I got to ask you, take us inside the mindset of a pitcher and just the mental approach, because in 76 against the Montreal Expos, you threw a no-hitter. So what is it like when you realize that something special like that is about to happen?
That was strange for me because that was my last year really of pitching. I got traded to the Cardinals at the end, but I had already thrown my arm out of joint and I couldn't throw. And I never did throw much after that. But even in that last year of 76, I didn't think I had great stuff. I had a lot of experience. I felt like I could still win, but I couldn't win the way I did when I was younger, which was by overpowering a lot of guys. And so I was thinking about that, but then the game got into the fifth or sixth inning, and I noticed that they didn't have any hits, and I started cranking it up a little more. And by the sixth or seventh inning, I was throwing a little harder. By the eighth and the ninth inning, I was probably throwing just about as hard as I ever could, and it was just a huge adrenaline kick. The other thing that happened in that game that was different than two other games, I had a no-hitter going into the ninth in New York. I think it was my rookie year, and in Atlanta in 1969, and both of the games were scoreless. So now, you're still, even though you're pitching a no-hitter, you're still trying to win the game. And so in those other games, I had more stuff throughout the game, but I had no runs. So if we didn't score in the ninth and then I got the no-hitter in the ninth, the game still wouldn't be over. I think later on they changed the rule that you didn't get credit for a no-hitter if you went into extra innings, and I'm not sure if that's true or not, but what is true is that you still have to try to win the game. And if you don't have any runs and you're on the road, you've got to pitch the 10th. And so in the no-hitter game in Houston against the Expos, we had a 6-0 lead. And so, I could, if I had wanted to, I could have pitched around every batter and just try to nibble corners and not worry about walking anybody, just to try to get 3 outs before they got a hit. But because I had that kick of adrenaline, I kind of went with that as my strategy instead of trying to throw a lot of different pitches and nip corners. In fact, I didn't throw anything but fastballs the last 2 innings. And the ball was kind of sailing, and the hitters were swinging under it and popping it up and striking out. And I had the Astrodome, which was a pretty hard ballpark to hit a home run in, and a 6-run lead. So my thought pattern at that point was just pitch for fly balls and strikeouts like they do now. I mean, when you got something like that going, stay with it.
Right. So how does a starting pitcher mentally prepare between starts, and what are the keys to staying locked in over the course of a long, Major League Baseball season?
I don't know that the routine between starts is probably similar for just about everyone, and that is doing enough exercise to stay in shape, doing enough preventative maintenance, which they do now with rotator cuff exercise. They got a whole routine of things they do to help your arm bounce back for the next start that we didn't know about back then. But basically it was just do your running, throw on the side in between. If you're having trouble with a certain pitch, to try to work on that between starts and basically get into that routine that you feel like you're going to be in all season long. And part of that is when you get a few years of experience, is that if you start a game, you don't necessarily have to throw your fastest pitch in the first inning. You can warm up in such a way that, at least for me, what I did is try to throw about 90% full effort. And then maybe the last 5 pitches, throw 5 pitches as hard as I could, just in case I got in that trouble in the first inning and I had to have a little bit more to try to get out of it. But if you don't get in trouble in the first inning, you can be cruising along at 90% effort for the whole game. You know, if you're throwing every single pitch with all your might, maybe you have to come out of there after 100 pitches. The thing that seems, this is a digression because it's not about between starts, but the one thing that I would, without having any numbers in front of me, the one thing that I would challenge as the strategy that is preferred now in using the bullpen. And that is if, let's say, the guy pitches 6 innings or 6 1/3, 2/3, and he's got to 100 pitches, and so he's going to come out of the game. So you bring in another guy, and the guy comes in and he strikes everybody out, or throws 4 pitches and gets an out in a double play, and then he comes into the dugout and they bring in another pitcher the next inning. So I don't see why a relief pitcher who comes in and shows you that he's got good command and good stuff and only throws 10 pitches or less, and then you're going to bring in somebody that may be a very good pitcher, but you never know what is going to happen when you bring in a new pitcher, because all of us have those days when we have trouble getting people out. And so I don't understand why they don't let a relief pitcher that's throwing well one inning later in a setup kind of role. If he pitches one inning and doesn't extend himself very much, why he can't pitch another inning?
Yeah. Hey, we are winding down our time. The great Larry Dierker with us on the Big E Sports Show. And Larry, you had such great success here in Houston with the Astros, both on the field and in the dugout. What did it mean to you just to spend so much of your baseball life here in Houston?
Oh, it meant everything to me, but only in retrospect, I think. I think there were times when I was playing that I thought if I could go to a contender, I might feel like that was a good opportunity. Uh-huh. Because I think all the years that I played, I think the best record we had was 81-81 and about 12 games out. So we were never, ever, not once in the pennant race in September. And that was something we all felt. I think every pitcher, player, every manager, everybody in the dugout, reason you play is to try to have a chance to win in September. But now looking back, I met my wife here.
Did you?
Somewhere else I wouldn't have met her.
Uh-huh.
And I like Houston because I think it's a really underrated city in terms of a great place to live.
I agree.
And so as an older guy now, looking back, it was so nice to have played here the whole time. I don't know. I think if I'd been one of these guys that went from one team to the next, and I might have ended up back in California because that's where I started out. But I'm sure that I'm not there now.
Yes. Hey, my final question for you, Larry, as a manager, just tell us a little bit about as far as what was your philosophy when it came to, handling pitchers and maintaining clubhouse chemistry.
If you have a good team and you're playing well enough, is just to stay out of the way. I was not a micromanager. I, had read Bill James and Pete Palmer and all the people that had done analytics prior to the big wave of analytics. So I kind of knew that, and we were in that steroid era, so there was a lot of home runs and a lot of high scoring games. And so I didn't bunt, I didn't hit and run, I didn't play small ball at all. Maybe a little bit in a low-scoring game where the other pitcher seemed to be dominating us. We might bunt or try to steal a base or hit and run. But mostly it was to be patient and let things play out. And then my strategy in terms of the pitchers was I worked pretty hard to try to get them in the mentality that they had to go as far into the game as possible. And the reason for that is that I felt like, and I think we usually carried 11 pitcher, and I usually felt like maybe the last 2 or 3 guys in the bullpen, the lowest in the pecking order, I wanted to keep them out of the game. I understood that they needed work, and we were going to have to find opportunities for everyone to work enough to feel comfortable in the game situation. But if I could get the game to the 8th inning, and I had a good 8th inning guy and a closer, which I did with Billy Wagner, my philosophy was to get the starters to go deep into the game and have that lockdown closer. But if you don't have him, it's one thing that I thought was insightful, and this was many years ago, and a lot of your audience won't even know these guys. A manager that's a Hall of Fame manager that had many, many winning teams was Earl Weaver. And he was the manager of the Baltimore Orioles, and they were a great team. But when someone asked him who he thought the best manager was, and he said Billy Martin. Well, Billy Martin was a very competitive guy,
yeah,
and a very emotional guy. He was always getting fights. Somebody getting fights with his players in the dugout during the game. He never lasted more than 3 years, because he would eventually make the owner so mad, he'd confront the owner. He just, he was hard to get along with. And so he had a couple of bouts with George Steinbrenner. But what Earl Weaver said, he said, the best manager is Earl Weaver. You get him in Minnesota, and he's got good starting pitchers and home run hitters, and that's how he managed. But then when he went to Oakland, he didn't have much power, much hitting, but he did have some good pitchers, and he did a terrific job with the pitching staff. He goes to Texas, and they've got a different kind of team, and he's a different kind of manager. Here's a guy that could take any bunch of 25 guys that are worthy of being in the major leagues and make them into a winning team, even if they didn't seem to have as much ability, or certainly weren't as well-rounded as some other teams. He won everywhere he went. He just couldn't keep a job.
Yeah. Hey, good stuff. Hey, we are up against the clock. I do have to ask you while we've got you on the program, what do you think ultimately should be done with the Astrodome? What do you think?
I think they should, when I say they, I don't know who they are, but I think there should be a way to generate enough revenue doing something in there to pay the taxes, so to speak. I think, it's a historic building. I would hate to see it taken down, but as a citizen, if it goes on and on and on, and it costs a fortune to keep it up without bringing in any revenue, I think maybe sometimes you have to make that hard decision. But what I'd like to see is, I'd like to see somebody figure out how to make money there.
Larry Dierker, one of the most respected voices in baseball, a man who truly has seen it all. As I mentioned in the open, a 2-time All-Star, former NL Manager of the Year, a beloved figure right here in Houston with the Astros. And we just want to say thank you so much for joining us, sharing your insight, your memories, and your legacy in baseball. It just continues to inspire. It's great to have you on. Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome. I enjoyed it.
You bet. Stick around. Much more coming your way on the Big E Sports Show.